Ahead and get started now. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar on night vision security kind of solutions. We're going to really dive into this and talk about, what makes a good one. How can we even potentially improve things? So let's actually jump right into the agenda. We're going to talk about like the challenges of low light. Why is this so hard to potentially get good low light images? And that's when we talk about low light, obviously we always think 3 a.m. in the morning, but that's also during dusk and dawn too, though those kind of edge times where, it's not quite perfectly dark, but it's in that where things aren't looking as good as they did at 2 in the afternoon. Um, and then we're going to talk about the solutions the industry has had for that. So infrared night vision. We're going to run into that, what that is, some of the pros and cons. Then we're going to talk about some of the color night vision solutions out there, what those mean. There's a lot of things that fall under that umbrella that sort of have different definitions, and it's a little confusing. So we'll try to break that down. We're going to talk about the newest technology on the market, which is the Chroma IQ technology that we're offering now with our first camera. And then we're going to go into improving current night vision. There's a lot of small things that you can do to potentially improve your current cameras, night vision performance without, replacing things. And we'll go into that. So a little bit about SCW first off. We're a value-driven company that provides end-to-end security solutions. So if you're looking for commercial, install, we have self-install options, turnkey, install it yourself, whatever you want. And if you're a dealer, we do have a dealer program, and our kind of claim to fame is our world-class US-based support. And it's free, unlimited for the life of the product. So you have somebody who has your back in this security venture. So seeing in the dark, what does it actually require for a camera to see in the dark? And let's start by the basics of a camera, right? So all cameras work by gathering light, and essentially the more the light, the sharper and clearer the image is going to be. Um, and then the lower the light, the harder that becomes. And so think about the last time you took photos with your smartphone in a low light situation, right? More likely than not, especially if something was moving around or something, if you got kids or pets or anything like that, they kind of look like a blur, right? And they don't necessarily always look like a blur in the nice sunny afternoon, but when you're trying to take them in the evening, it gets a lot more grainy, blurry, stuff like that. So how is that light actually gathered by the camera? So we're going to really quickly go through this, but there's three different major things. There's the lens aperture, which basically controls how much light that lens lets in. There's also the sensor size. So basically, in general, larger sensors collect that light a little bit better. Um, and then there's also the shutter speed. So without going into crazy detail, what the shutter speed does is it controls, how much light is let in by how long it takes for, each action, right? And the slower the shutter speed, the more light gets let in, and the faster shutter speed, the less light gets let in. And so the double-edged sword aspect of it is that the lower you lower it, but your motion becomes blurry. That's why we get those blurry photos, is because the shutter speed is reduced to let in more light. Now you might be saying, "Hey, I thought this was a security camera webinar," and it is. The key point though is security cameras, and the key word there, of course, is camera. Security cameras are still cameras, and they play by the same rules, right? There's no kind of magic here that we can do to magically get night vision to look great and everything like that. But the difference between a typical smartphone camera or a dedicated camera is that security cameras have to work 24/7, 365 days a year. Um, and in fact, low light video is even harder than taking a picture in a lot of ways. And that working has to be 3 a.m., 6 p.m. On a cloudy, moonless day. It has to work, and it has to give us evidence that we can use um, in the event of a security incident. So how do we actually see it at 3 a.m. though? Well, again, we need to get light. And how has the industry provided that light over time? Well, the first kind of lighting source that cameras have used, and frankly still is probably the most common way security cameras are lit, is something called infrared. So again, the cameras need light, so what they did is they built a light into the camera. Um, and so infrared is a light source that um, basically lights up the area for the camera. The camera can see it just like, we can see a white light. But the infrared is kind of invisible to us. So if you look very closely at the camera, you'll see like a little red glow. Um, but it's not going to show you like on the ground that there's lighting there or anything like that. Um, and so this was a pretty good initial solution here. So let's take a look at what that looks like here at night. Back up a little bit. So looking at that, you can see, let's talk about the pros and cons of infrared light vision. The first pro is that it's nearly invisible, right? So if you're not trying to keep it a little bit more stealthy, infrared is a great way of doing it. Another great thing about infrared is there's a lot of long range distant capability. So, we have some of our cameras that can go over 800 feet with infrared, whereas traditional white light sources are actually, we'll talk about it, but are a lot shorter range generally. Um, and the other pro is that it's affordable and effective. If you have a dark area and you've got no lighting or limited lighting, this is going to do a fairly good job of lighting it up. The considerations, though, are, of course, that it is monochrome, right? So when we look at that video and we see kind of what I look like there, that this is a completely, essentially, technically not black and white, but monochrome look. And so you can't tell what color shirt I've got on, you can't tell what color pants, any color detail whatsoever. Another thing is that infrared tends to be a little bit more prone to reflection. It's a little bit more of a reflective light source. So you sort of got to be careful about placement, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So the road to color, the biggest downside to infrared is that we get no color. And, color isn't just there for looks, right? Obviously, color is a really important security detail. And this is especially true in facilities that are actively monitored. So if you've got, local guards, or you've even got remote guarding service, or somebody's reacting to the cameras in closer to real time, right? So you want to know things like, hey, what color shirt is that person wearing? What pants? What color was that car? These details really matter in, trying to react to a situation. And another major piece of this too is one of the things that's happening now with some of our cameras is that we've got something called color search. And so what that allows me to do is search for all the red cars over a course of a time period. So I can say, hey, show me all the red cars this last week. Obviously, if it's at night and it's a black and white image, we can't do that at night. So getting color has been a desire for the industry for a very long time. And how can we do that? Well, the first generation came out, and a lot of this was a big marketing push in the industry to say color night vision and all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of it's fairly gimmicky. It was there to push product, didn't care about customer satisfaction, didn't care about the end result of it. They just wanted people to be appealed to the fact that they're going to get color at night. Now, what it ended up usually being is that these cameras were kind of pre-configured to have a lower shutter speed, which meant something like this image here, where you can see like, yeah, we kind of got color, but it's completely, there's no detail in the image. Everything's a blur. When he walks past, it's just a blur. And a lot of times people went with that and then they felt really burned by it. We would get people that said, "Hey, I bought some of these color night vision things and they look terrible. The guy was looked like a ghost." I've heard that where it's just like they're floating across and they fall in and out of the background, stuff like that. Um and so like for a while this was kind of like something that was very popular, and then like it diminished very quickly because people started to, you know, understand sort of what was going on. So the next stage of evolution here in the night vision is, hey, instead of putting an infrared light source on the camera, what if we put a white light? And so this is, essentially like putting a flashlight on the camera. And um, it's standard white warm lights, whatever you want to call them. And the benefit here is very obvious because now we've got lighting, and so the camera can perform better, and we get color. But of course, there's considerations with that, right? So with white lighting, you get color footage, and it can also act as a deterrent. In fact, some of our cameras with white lighting can, and we'll show that in a second, with the hybrid approach, can turn on when it detects somebody, um, and act as a deterrent in that case too. Um, and then I think when you look at white light and you're thinking about the positioning and all that kind of stuff, I always tell people it's like a flashlight, and it's easy to understand that, if you point a flashlight a little bit more at the ground, it's going to be better than if you point it up in the sky. Um, so it's a little more easy to, I'd say, install potentially than infrared for some people because you can't necessarily see the infrared when you're pointing the camera. So, um, and of course, consideration, the double-edged sword is it's entirely visible. So a lot of these cameras with white lighting, the white lighting is on all night. So instead of using infrared, it turns on the white light when the low light kind of situation happens. Um, the other kind of big downside to white light is it's generally not as long range. Infrared, we've got ones that they're up to 900 feet or so. Um, with white light, the ratings on most of them are around 100, 150 at the most. And the drop off there, in my experience, is a lot. So by drop off, I just mean that as you get further away from the white light, I feel like the drop off is a little bit more noticeable than your infrared as well. And the last kind of consideration is that it's very direct. So what that means is it can almost like light things up sometimes too much, especially faces, and you can kind of get some issues with that. So the third option kind of in this is like a hybrid approach. And so what that means is having a camera that has both infrared and white light built into it. And allowing the white light to be triggered by something. In this case, it's analytics. And so we've had webinars on our analytics and talked about it. Just I believe our last one was on that. So if you're interested, take a look at it. But built-in analytics on the camera have gotten so much better over the last couple of years that we can now reliably turn on and do actions based on it. So it knows there's a person there. Let's turn on that white light and let them know that, hey, you're on camera and you're being seen. Um, so let's take a look at this incident here, actually. And this is real world footage that we gotten. So I'll pause it here for a second. This person's walking around at night. I know it's kind of cut off here, but it's about 2:30 in the morning. And by default, this camera is set to infrared mode. So what that means is back here is completely black. We're not, lighting up the area, anything like that. But as soon as it detects him as a person, it switches over into the white light, turns on the white light, and now you can see we get color. And it also, in this case, it gives an audio warning with the speaker, so that way this person knows they're on camera and that they shouldn't be here at this hours. And then they leave. And so a couple things about the nice thing about this, right? So if we go back a little bit again here, and I'm going to pause it just before that white light turns on. So when we look at him, we've got no idea what color. There's nothing really. A lot of detail is lost when it comes to the infrared. When it comes to color, obviously, but as soon as the white light turns on, this person becomes a lot more identifiable. We've got he's wearing a black Carhartt hoodie. He's got a brown and black backpack. He's wearing a white undershirt, and he's got light colored blue jeans. Um, with this, we've got no idea what that is. And so, if somebody's sitting there watching that camera and they've got to figure out where this person went, it's going to be very difficult to um, give that evidence to somebody or be able to figure out who that person is without that color detail. So pros and cons of that hybrid solution. Color footage when you need it. You're not going to have that constant white light that's always on, and also it can act as a deterrent. So um, considerations though, there is a slight lag time. Like you may have noticed that like as he kind of got closer, it took a second or two for it to switch over to that white light. So, um, that's a consideration, especially maybe like a faster moving thing. If you got like a very fast moving car coming by and stuff, there might be a little bit of a lag time, especially if it's like if the camera's looking at like a shorter area or something like that. Um, and then it still relies on that. It relies on the detection. So you got to kind of make sure that we've got decent lighting with the infrared and everything like that, so it detects the person in the first place. And then, of course, when that does turn on, it's still a direct white light. So you're not kind of hiding that or kind of getting around that part of the hybrid approach. So what's the next thing? That's kind of been what the industry's been like for quite a while. And um, kind of what is the next potential avenues? And so this is where we kind of introduced the Chroma IQ technology, which is really one of the first true leaps in night vision technology that we've seen in a very, very long time. And how is it really doing it? Well, I mean, AI is everywhere. It's unavoidable, whether it's something on your smartphone doing something, whether it's ChatGPT or all this kind of stuff. And when we think about security cameras, we always think about analytics, being able to see people, vehicles, or more advanced ones that we can do more stuff with. But what if we could use AI to increase and enhance the image quality? And that's what this is doing here. So um, here's this video, and this is taken at close down the audio here. This is at 3:43 in the morning, and this is taken with my smartphone. And this is a very accurate representation of the lighting level here. So it's not a very well lit environment here. It's fairly what I would consider low light. There's some lighting here, but in this general area, there's not a lot of light. And then you notice the camera's actually over here, and you notice that there's no white light on in the camera. And then I'll keep walking towards it. And then here's the same video from that camera. And same area, that's an infrared camera. And so you see there's a lot key things here is that the motion is very number one is it's very bright, it's very well lit looking, even though the actual area is not very well lit. But then number two is that there's no shutter speed gimmicks here. That as I move, even my hand is still there's very little blur there, even with the low light, which is incredible. And even as I go further back, we don't have that drop off we do with lighting. And then the other side here, so this camera also, we'll cover it a little bit more in depth, does have a diffuse white light in some situations. So you can see even in a low light situation like we've got over here, it's not turning on. But if you've got zero lighting whatsoever and you're in a dark, dark kind of room, there's no moon out, there's cloudy, all that kind of stuff. It does have a white light as a backup. And I kind of want to show this is with the smartphone, kind of what that looks like. And it's not a very bright light or anything like that. It's not a direct light. But you can see how dark this actually is. It's disorientingly dark. And then here's that same area with the Chroma IQ camera. And again, the clarity here, the fact that my hand waving is doesn't have all it's on a blur is extremely impressive. So how does this really fully work? So it's a two-pronged approach. We're going to start with the camera fundamentals and then go into that image processing. So the first thing is, like I mentioned earlier, all cameras are cameras. Security cameras are cameras, right? And we have to start with the fundamentals. And we start these cameras, these Chroma IQ cameras, with amazing low light hardware. So that's going to be the lens, the sensors, and of course the image processor, which we'll talk about in a second. So starting with that aperture I mentioned earlier, the lens opening, this has an f1.0 lens. And for reference, a lot of security cameras generally hover around f2.0. The lower the number, the more light it lets in. So in that case, an f1.0 lens lets in 4 times more light than an f2.0 lens. And again, more light, better image quality. So we're starting at the ground with a lot of light coming into this camera. Then we pair it with the sensor. So the light goes into the sensor, and what is the sensor like? Well, we've got a sensor that's 2 times larger than the standard 1/3 image sensor. And again, that more light's coming in from the lens, and now it's got a bigger surface area to kind of hit and give us a better image quality there. So these are two fundamental things that we do to make sure that we're starting with the right lighting. And then kind of like the secret sauce here. So when the light comes in on that image sensor, it goes into an image processor. And that image processor is responsible for basically converting what that sensor's telling it into an actual image, all in real time, of course, with video and everything like that. And for a lot of times these have been, they've been improving, but like, it's the noise reduction, stuff like that happens with them. But this took it to a brand new level. And show you the way it works is that there's 9 processes it's doing basically in real time at pixel level. So there's color, contrast, detail improvements, noise reduction, blur and smear reduction, and it's been trained on billions of images and scenes, and that's kind of what allows it to react to all these different scenes that it's going to be installed in. And just to show you kind of what that looks like here as well. From sort of the start to the finish. And again, this is all happening in real time with the videos that we've seen so far. And then kind of our final look at there. So that's, again, in a dark area on a farm there. So no lighting, anything like that. And let's talk about the specific camera first off. That's the first one delivering this new technology. We call it the Deputy 4.0 V5 with Chroma IQ. And this is one of our first cameras we've ever had that has no infrared at all. It's only either the no white light or the diffuse white light. And again, the white light is optional. It only turns on in the darkest of scenarios. And in fact, you can actually turn it off in that one, but you would be subjected to probably more blur and stuff like that. Um, this camera is a workhorse, generally used camera, so it's great for almost every application outside or in low light situations inside as well. But this is the first that's presenting this new chipset, this one that's presenting this new concept with the lenses and the larger sensors and more and more are going to come. We're going to get the 8 megapixels, sometime this year, and stuff like that. So this is just the first one here. And before I go into the um, the next stage, which is we're going to be talking about kind of improving current cameras. If you guys want to put in any questions that you might have, feel free to do it now. I do see one now, which is a really great question. Is does this AI work without an internet connection? And the answer is yes, because these cameras the processor is built within the camera. So this is all happening in real time. It doesn't talk to the cloud. You don't need the internet at all for this to work. This is all locally done in the camera, all in real time. It's something that you're not like enabling or anything like that. It just knows what to do immediately. Give it just a second here to any more questions on any night vision questions or specific to the Chroma IQ technology, feel free to throw those in. And the next stage, we're going to talk about the improving the night vision without replacing.
I think we should pause and take a second and thank you for waking up at 3 a.m. to take that footage earlier.
Yeah, yeah. It was like, yeah, I might as well do it. I just came back from Japan. And my sleeping schedule was already messed up, so it was. it was good timing for me.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was like, I can't do 11 o'clock. It doesn't seem dark. Like, you got to go to the darkest hours of the night.
Right.
So
No, it's good. I think it represented it really well for sure. And then watching the transitions on the steps on how it works was, yeah, I kind of want to watch that again.
it's also scary because we live in a bear country too. So like in that dark area, like we've had bears in there multiple dozens of times, and it's like, okay, am I gonna run into a bear? Because I can't see more than like a foot in front of my face, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna either run into a bear or that guy with the flashlight who's happens to be prowling around that night maybe. So, but fortunately, I went off unscathed. Um, yeah, let's keep going with the improving the night vision. Um, and let's talk about, we're going to go over a couple different things here that are small tips, but they really, really matter. And the first one is the physical placement. Again, I've been saying this a couple times, but think of whether it's an IR camera or a white light camera, that these are basically like flashlights. And when you grab a flashlight and you aim it at something, you'll see obviously like if you aim it at a wall, that light's gonna hit that wall and you're sort of wasting that light, right? Same thing if you're on a soffit. I've seen a lot of cameras that have night vision issues or ones that half the light's hitting the soffit. Um, and that light ends up getting blocked. And let's look at an example here. So this is a camera that's kind of pointed here towards the light or the wall, and you can see a lot of the light is focused here on the wall. So first off, we're wasting some of the infrared light here on the wall. But then number two, this area is so bright that the camera sort of gets tricked and it thinks like, hey, this image is a little bit brighter than it. And so I can like reduce my settings and stuff. And you can see over here, it's very dark. So we're not really able to see what's going on very much on the porch. Um, and then over here, it's basically the void. It's completely black over here. So we're not going to be able to see anybody walking over here. And so just by moving this camera over a little bit, this is what we get. So again, I go back, forward, and you can see that it's a totally different image. So now this is all well lit over here. We can see that this is actually a driveway and a parking lot. We can see the porch much better. Oops. And these are literally like 15 seconds apart. So, um, and this is by two reasons. Number one, the camera is not wasting any of that infrared light on the wall. But then number two, it's also centering the brightness in the middle, and so that way it knows that hey, this area is actually really dark over here, and it's not this isn't a very bright image, so I need to kind of get into high gear and actually make this bright. So it's kind of two-pronged approach. So if first thing, if you're having night vision issues and you feel like you've always had night vision issues, is make sure you don't have like hot spots like that. And whether that's the wall, soffits, anything in front of the camera could potentially be causing this. The next one is cleaning. And so one of the things that we sometimes hear from clients is that, hey, when I first got these cameras, the night vision was awesome. And now 3 years down the line, they just don't look quite as good. And is that because the LEDs are dimming or something like that? And that's not actually the case. The lights are basically going to be the same brightness throughout the life until after thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, die off. They're not going to like get dimmer generally, or at least noticeably dimmer. And what it typically is things build up on the camera. So if we go all the way back, and just to show an example of a camera, in this case, the camera lens is right here, and the bottom part here is the illuminator. And that's true for almost all of them, right? So the IR, whether it's IR or white light, the illuminator is usually on the bottom below the lens. And so you can imagine it if dirt, dust, um, you know, grease, stuff like that starts to really build up on there. It's again like a flashlight. You put some stuff on front of grab some dirt, put it on front of the flashlight. It's not going to be quite as bright as it was without the dirt. And so the cleaning is a really important part of especially night vision. And there's also other environmental things like spider webs that pop up, um, other bugs and stuff like that. Um, Wasp will put up nests and paper wasp and all these kind of things will come up in front of the camera. Um, and so just giving them a clean can be a massive difference. And a lot of times one of the questions we get is like, how should I clean cameras? Well, I don't recommend any kind of chemicals or anything like that. Like, don't go use Windex or anything harsh on the cameras. I just recommend gentle distilled water. In fact, what I would usually do is grab some canned air, make sure you brush off or get rid of all of the any dirt and stuff that's going to scratch it, because you don't want to scratch the lenses or anything like that either. So blow it off with some canned air, use some distilled water, and then use a microfiber cloth to kind of dry it off to a um, clean look. And that way there's no spots or anything like that too. And here's an example. One of the things that makes it really difficult is, especially if you don't look at your night vision cameras very frequently, is during the day, a camera's, that grime and dirt buildup doesn't usually show as much during the day, or environmental factors don't usually show very much in the day. So here's this example of this camera during the day. Looks amazing, everything looks fine, and then at night, this is what it looks like. And this is actually a spider web, single little strain of spider web that you couldn't even see physically if you got up close to it. And this thing is kind of waving in the wind, all in the air. And in this case, especially if you have an older camera that only does regular motion detection, it was detecting as motion all night. Now the newer cameras with better analytics would probably fix that, but this camera was one that was detecting motion all night because it was an older one. And so um, other things that are a lot more obvious at night, like this spider making a nest in front of the camera, can happen. And then just dirt and grime in general. So you can kind of see like how different this example is here with this clean camera versus this one that's got dust and just handprints on it and fingerprints on it. Um, Sometimes it's very extreme like this. Sometimes it's, very subtle, and it kind of like happens over time and builds up and builds up. The other solution, again, how we spent a lot of this webinar this morning, afternoon, talking about light and how important light is for cameras. Sometimes adding just a simple solar motion light can make a camera more effective, because in general, the more light, the better the image. Now, I will say this is a place where you do want to be careful. Placement matters. What you really got to make sure you're avoiding is positioning that new light, the exterior light source. So again, I'll just use a solar motion light as an example. You don't want to point that at the camera, so it's like blinding the camera. But you also want to make sure it's not like um, reflecting against things. You want to make sure that it's positioned in a way that's not going to actually make the image potentially look worse. So definitely want to look at that when you install that white light, or the exterior lighting, to make sure that it looks okay. Um, and then the other side of that too, if you don't want white light and you want it to be a little bit more stealthy, there are actually external infrared illuminators too. And I will say that these have a little bit more consideration because, again, when you're pointing them and stuff like that, it's very hard to see. So you got to make sure you're sort of looking at the camera while you're doing that. Grab your smartphone app, watch the camera, pointing it around and stuff like that. Um, and one of the things I'll say about the IR illuminators too that you got to be careful with is, um, almost all the cameras react to the lighting level. So, for example, our cameras have something called smart infrared, that when you walk in front of the camera and it's got, it knows that that light is sort of kind of, putting your face in a, like you look kind of like a ghost and it's really white. It will dial back that infrared power, and so that way there's more detail in the face. Now the camera can't control those external IR illuminators, so you got to kind of make sure that you're not overdoing it, and that you're not making it to where somebody is very well lit, but they're so well lit they're like glowing. So, it's a little bit of practice and a little bit of testing. Make sure you're walking through it. Make sure you leave when you're done installing any kind of lighting or any camera really, that you're satisfied with that performance. But definitely with IR, it's a little bit more tricky. And when all else fails, so if you've kind of feel like you got good positioning, when you've got you're pretty sure that camera's clean, and you maybe just have a really old camera that just simply isn't getting it done. It might be time for an upgrade. And like I said, there's really no better time. We're at the crux of like one of the biggest innovations in video surveillance when it comes to night vision. AI is really changing it. in terms of like all those processes that have happened before, it's so much more effective at it. The denoising, um, the noise cancellation, the sharpening, all this stuff is significantly better with the Chroma IQ camera than it was in the previous series. And one of the great things about this too is you don't have to upgrade every single camera you have. Like in this poll result, for example, 56% of people said that they feel mixed about this. That some of them are good, some of them could be better. And so, if you got cameras that are night are good, maybe you don't have to upgrade those ones. But the ones where you're kind of like, ooh, I don't know, I'm not 100% confident that I'm gonna get decent footage, then maybe you want to upgrade those ones. So you can be strategic about it. Um, and upgrade those hotspots or the unperforming areas first. So obviously you have a camera where nobody walks in front of, but once a year or something like that, versus one where you've got constant low light activity. You might want to upgrade the more constant one quicker. So, and with that being said, that's the end of our presentation here. So I'm going to open the floor up for some Q&A. I got one question so far. Just hit that Q&A button on Zoom and we'll get them answered here. Um, and we had a question that says, how well does Chroma IQ deal with vehicle headlights? We have multiple cameras that views the street traffic. Good question. I probably want to see like what some of maybe your current cameras look like because that's a difficult thing that you know, I don't know if that's, to be honest with you, going to be like specifically handling that much better than a normal camera, just because it's sort of again like a flashlight that um is hitting that camera. So sometimes that's a positioning thing. If we can position them to where like the headlights aren't hitting them as much, that's better. Now some of our cameras do have like highlight compensation, so when it does detect something like hitting it like a headlight, it can more automatically adjust. So that's maybe something that we can look at too. And then another thing is that you can make a lot of manual adjustments to the camera. So that's something that we could potentially look at too. So, um, a lot of different ways of handling that. I wouldn't necessarily say the Chrome IQ is going to be dramatically better at something like headlights than another camera, but because it's lower light in general, you might not need to have the exterior lighting. So gives us a little bit more flexibility of the positioning, basically. All right. Any other questions? Just feel free to put them in there. And I did see one of the other questions were about getting a recorded presentation. We will be sending that out here to you guys in email and some information on the what we covered here. So, but thank you guys for taking your time out here on Thursday. We'll give it another minute here or so to see if we got any other questions. And if not, we'll end it. But we do appreciate your time and participation. And if you do have any questions or after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. Our security experts can get you in touch there too. So, a really good question is, are there any IR illuminators that we recommend? We don't actually sell them specifically. It's just, in general, we've kind of because they're difficult to install and a lot of things that satisfaction wise. So um I don't have like a specific recommendation. I would sort of just look at general reviews and stuff like that. There are some ones that are like definitely on the higher end of the range. I'm trying to remember that company's name here. Give me just a second. Believe. Yeah, Axton, which is Axton, is one that does produce like very high-end commercial level illuminators that I would look into. Um, and then the other ones, the considerations with a lot of them is that you do have to obviously get power to them, so you're having to run separate power to it. Um, so do keep that in mind. But Axton's one that you may want to look at for sort of the higher end, I would say. Otherwise, a lot of them are going to be pretty similar. It's, just basically LEDs in there. I want to say the Axon stuff, if I'm pronouncing that right, can do some of the drawing back if it detects things. So there's a little bit more intelligence there too. Yeah, and they're fairly easy to install too. I have tested and messed with them, and they're good stuff. It just, doesn't necessarily usually fit with what we do in everyday kind of scenarios, I would say most of the time. But they have a lot of range of things. So, all right, give it another minute here, and then we'll call it a day. And like I mentioned, feel free to reach out to us. You'll get an email, respond to that email, reply to it if you've got any additional questions or want to talk it out with somebody. We get a team of security experts that no obligation if you just want to have a conversation about strategically upgrading or learning more about this camera, or if you don't have a camera system, which 17% of you did not, you're looking for a new one. No better time. I mean, this is a great time to buy. With the analytics being better, the white lighting or the night vision being better without needing the white light and stuff like that. It's just a one of the more interesting times right now in our industry. Post-COVID kind of technology boom, I guess you could say. All right. Well, I think that's good for today. Dylan, anything else you wanted to add before we jump off?
No, I think that's it. Just to confirm, we'll send out the recording once Zoom is done processing it, along with the recap. And yeah, feel free to reply to that email if you guys have questions or yeah, contact support. But that's it. Good job, James. Thought that was good.
All right. Yeah, great. Thank you. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.
See
Bye-bye.
you guys.